Hey everybody, welcome back to eStudio. Elizabeth Nader here, and today I'm happy to be able to bring to you Tom Russo. Tom, welcome to eStudio.
Thank you for the opportunity, Liz. How are you doing today?
I'm good. We are going to introduce you to a lot of different people today and your life story, your book, what you do to help other people, and just hope to inspire people about the possibilities they have in their life to overcome obstacles, because that's what we do in this show, is inspiring people to overcome obstacles and really move the mountains in their life so they can live the life they were intended and created to live. So Tom, we're going to dig into your book, which is such a fun book, especially since we're both in politics or have been, or, deal with it. But it's called There Are No Politics in Heaven. And the subtitle is A Recovering Politician's Guide to Christian Living. So great title, by the way.
Thank
Love
you.
it. Love the title, but this is your life story. And what I love in the preface is what you say is, I will quote this: "This is a story about the human condition and our ability to overcome obstacles and find faith bigger than fear." And you talk about true inner peace and purpose. So Tom, let's start with your life story, because really what's great about it is it's kind of an everyman's things you had to overcome that other people just sometimes don't find a way to overcome, and it inspires others. So let's start with your childhood in New Jersey, and for the most part, really kind of your traditional Catholic Italian family, right?
Right. So, lots of aunts, uncles, and cousins, a lot of happiness, a lot of joy. Originally, I was from Lincoln Park. When I was 7 years old, we moved to Lake Parsippany, and then that's when things started to shift. When you're small and you move to another town, right, you're trying to figure out your place.
Yeah.
But as I experienced different things in elementary school and middle school, specifically, being overweight and being bullied, there were all these emotional challenges, and it's like, how do you process that, between ages, 11 and 16 or 17? And I'm not going to lie, it was a very difficult time of life, and it was even, very difficult even to write about it as far as the book.
Yeah. Well, you can tell in the book the pain you're feeling in middle school. And in my experience, it's not unusual. You probably had it worse than most people do. Your weight was an issue. And, you talked often about your mom being nurturing, but kind of hoping your dad would confirm you a little bit more, but you struggled. And middle school for so many people is a painful time. And I ask you this because I think it's powerful when you look back in life. If you could go talk to Tom, little Tom, who's in middle school, at a time in which you're questioning everything, what would you say to him now to help him through that process?
Sure. I think part of it was the standards put upon me by others to be perfect, which is elusive, right? Other than, Michael Phelps in the Olympics, or certain people that might achieve some brief moment of perfection in their life or their professional endeavors. It's not realistic to put that burden on a child, right? So having that level of expectation was very difficult. So I would let that younger version of Tom know that it's okay not to be perfect. And the second thing I think would be to have comfort in articulating challenges or emotional difficulties and not internalizing them. So how did I internalize them? I internalized them through food.
Right.
And so the obesity was already there, and then you internalize emotional challenges or difficulties, and then the cycle just perpetuated. So there's other things besides food to find that comfort and solace. And I would let that person, that version of Tom, know that it's okay to have difficulties and challenges, because you're not perfect and you're not meant to be perfect.
Which everything you're saying also is, because we can't go tell little Tom that, obviously, but what you're saying is really tremendously helpful for parents, to understand that those middle school years are really the years where we pick up so much potential pain, if in fact that's the way life goes, that we are dealing with as adults. And, you have spent so many years, as you talk about later in the book, and we'll get into it, really trying to overcome the things that happened to you when you were young, or even more sort of losing yourself and trying to find who you were before the world told you otherwise. So you had that pain in middle school, but as you got into high school, you decided to kind of take it the other way. So tell us what then happened and what transformation happened to you in high school.
Sure. So, I swung the pendulum the other direction, Liz. So between sophomore and junior year of high school, I decided that starvation was a good strategy. So I starved myself to lose 100 pounds.
Wow.
So when I entered junior year of high school at Parsippany Hills, people didn't even recognize me, didn't know who I
Sure.
was. But to a person, they all thought I was a rock star because I was now the thin version. And I gained acceptance because now the external version of Tom was pleasing to the masses instead of them focusing on the person within, which didn't change, right?
Yeah.
I was generally happy. I was affable. I had a good sense of humor. I was a good student. I like those things didn't change just because the shell changed, but because the shell changed, now I had societal acceptance, and it was both an interesting lesson, and in some ways I was grateful, and in many ways it made me sad at the same time.
Yeah.
that
Well,
that,
you
that,
said it.
that was the lesson I learned about society, was give them what
Yeah.
they want, give them the facade, and that was enough. And that's the thing that I carried with me, unfortunately, into politics at an early age.
Yeah.
And yet I carried it with me the second time in politics later in life and in my 40s. So that burden and that lesson spent decades with me until I finally purged it a few years ago.
You said in the book that you traded one cruel reality for another when you
Mm-hmm.
lost the weight, and now you're trying to please people in a different way. But this is also the root of your interest in politics. Is
Right.
started really in your younger years, and the way I read it anyway, it seemed like you caught on that if you could win in the political world, if you could be an influence there, that you would get that admiration from people and that acceptance and that affirmation that you were looking for. Is that where kind of the whole political bug started for you?
There was always this duality for the politics for me. There was the genuine desire at a very young age that I had this empathy for people that had challenges in their life. And I remember even as a child being very conscious of other children and the fact that they didn't have what I had or didn't have as much as we did as a family, even though we were lower middle class.
Mm-hmm.
I felt the pain of people that suffered, whether it was muscular dystrophy and the MDA telethon I remember watching as a kid and being heartbroken, and just other organizations locally in Parsippany. I just had this heartfelt sense of, okay, there are people that are not as fortunate as I,
Right.
and I need to do something to help them. So, but along with that came the political end of, I need politics to feel good about myself. I need the adulation. I need the affirmation and the attention, because I was starving for that when I was the overweight kid getting bullied and beat up. And then I go into politics. And I hate to say it, but the worst thing that could happen is somebody with low self-esteem going into politics. Like that's a
Yeah.
bad scenario. But that's what it was. So there was
Yeah.
always this duality, even in the second time I ran for office, the genuine desire to serve and the genuine need. And I learned that I didn't need to do that, but at that moment in time it was, I need to find things externally to fill the void internally. That's what it
Well,
was.
what's interesting though is you use that to fill the void, but you had the God-given gifts to do it well. So that's sort of the trap, right? Because you could speak well, you public speaking,
Right.
debate,
Sure.
persuade people, a lot of door-to-door personal connections, you had the empathy, all of that. So it's like God gave you that skill set, he gave you all those gifts and talents, but you were using them in an area that would never fulfill you. I mean,
Right.
how long did you keep going to the next, to the next? You talk in the book about, okay, I'm going to run for this now and I'm run for that. And it seemed like it was never enough for you.
Yeah, so initially it was, youngest ever elected in Parsippany, right? Big town, very political. So having that level of success in my early 20s was, yeah, in some ways very impressive, but yet it put me on this treadmill, the hamster wheel, as I describe it in the book, of, it's never enough. I have to just keep going on to the next thing. And that's why the title of the book is funny and sad, because there are no politics in heaven is catchy, but the title is as much for the audience and the purchaser of the book as it is for me telling me there are no politics in heaven, because that was the thing I valued the most, as if that was going to get me into the promised land. And I assure you, politics does not get you into the pearly gates. So,
No.
right. But, there's this talent, for lack of a better word, of, like
Yeah.
you said, public speaking, a connection to people, the fact that I can run government, I am great at it, and
Right.
very blessed to be able to manage people and budgets very well. I needed to purge the fact that, like, I didn't need to, the title is what I do, but it's not who I am. And it took
Right.
me 40 plus years to figure that out. And when I did, there was a lot of relief and a lot of gratitude that, okay, I can work in government, which I still do as an appointed official, not an elected official,
Right.
but it doesn't define my existence and who I am. And that gave me great peace. And then that's also when I realized, well, I can take the skills. The skills are not just for politics. They're transferable to writing a book or editing 3 books or
Right.
teaching at college. So I can have an audience in a different way, or I can work with a different group of people, but make it more about them and less about me.
Well, it's interesting because, you say something that people don't really hook onto until later in life, which is it's not what I do doesn't define me, right? Who
Right.
God made you to be and the gifts and talents and purpose. It's not what you do for a living, or we
Right.
we we define ourselves that way. When you meet someone, you say, "What do you do?"
What do
Right?
you
And
do?
they say,
Right.
"This is what I do for a living." So as the early Tom is chasing politics and all of that, where are you at this whole time spiritually? What is your relationship like with God? How much of a
Right.
part is it playing in your life?
I would say, I was the Italian Catholic. I was the do the sacraments. We didn't really go to church very often as a child, as a kid growing up. My first marriage, I would say religion was more of a priority in terms of consistent worship. But it was something that I really changed when I became a born again Christian in September of 2015. And we'll talk more about that experience. But
Right.
I didn't have a relationship with God. It was in some ways transactional, just like politics. In some ways, it was you go to God when you need something or
Right.
when you need whatever, and it wasn't relational. And it wasn't until later in life that I started to have that relationship. And also, when you had the ego and self-esteem issues that I had, and you go into politics and then you start to put yourself above others, God has a funny way of recalibrating your ego. And that's why I said in the book, I had myself on the throne until God kicked me off.
Yeah.
But I needed the push. I needed God to say, no, like, this isn't where you're supposed to be, and politely, recalibrated my existence and my ego, and I needed it. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though at the time it seemed very painful and confusing. In hindsight, that was when God loved me enough and wanted me to focus more on my character than my comfort. That's how I
Oh, that's
described it in the book.
interesting.
Yeah.
Right. That's a very good quote. So as you look back and you're saying it's a transactional, I hear that a lot from people. It's a
Mhm.
transactional relationship with God. Do you sense that you avoided anything more personal because it would force you to look at yourself in a way that you weren't ready to look at? I mean, a personal relationship with God, a personal
Mhm.
relationship with anyone forces you to look more closely at yourself. Do you think you were avoiding some of that pain, avoiding doing that work, avoiding really looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself?
Yeah, I was avoiding the demons. I was avoiding the discomfort of acknowledging the imperfections.
Yeah.
And it was just easier. And I think most people find it easier just to push it under the carpet, right? Metaphorically speaking, and just not deal with things. And then yet, when I came to my decision point in 2015, live or die, and then kind of recalibrated my existence and rebooted my world, I confronted the demons, and it was very painful to do that. I tell people it was the hardest thing I ever did, was to confront the childhood demons of 30 years prior. But it was also the best thing I did, because I finally got that sense of relief, and I felt that that burden was off of me, and that I could define who I was and what my life should be like, not based on the preconceived notions of others or the
Right.
expectations of parents or siblings or people in the community. It was, at that point, it was between God and I. And if things worked out in the rest of my life, it would follow along that path, right, rather than the other way around. So yeah, I found a relationship with God that I never had before, because I didn't want to forget being honest with God. I didn't want to be honest with myself.
Right, right. So is it fair to define the years before 2015 as successful but empty?
Oh, I would say successful but empty and vapid. Yeah.
And how many people do you, and we're going to talk about 2015, because obviously that's the big turning point. That's the whole reason why you can help people now and you tell your story.
Right.
But how many people do you meet now, Tom, that you sort of instantly know, I see myself in you, successful but empty?
Oh, I say, and I just met with people today. I would fall into that category. You can tell when there's this facade of, success, and I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, when you've gone through what I've gone through spiritually, and in terms of mental health issues, you can get the sense when somebody's not, I would say, either hiding, or they're trying to overcome their burdens and their challenges by focusing on different things. Or, I hate to say it, but sometimes you can see that they're heading off the cliff, like it's coming, because you can hear the way they're talking about their marriage or their kids or their finances, and you just know the pitfall is coming. And that's the whole reason I wrote the book, was to
Yeah.
catch them before they fall off the cliff like I did. Like I
Right.
don't want people to step on the landmines. I want them to avoid them. It took me 40 some odd years. I'd rather people figure it out in their 20s and 30s, because then that gives them much more joy and peace and opportunity to live a fulfilling life. So if my story resonates with people, it's a blessing, and I know it does. But yeah, I can kind of, when I talk to, and sometimes it's more men than women, but it's definitely universal. You can definitely get the sense when they're going down the path, and I hope I can be honest with them and provide the comfort and space to get them onto a different path.
Well, this is, the reason we go through things in life. Ultimately, redeeming those things is using them to help other people. And I mean, that's the point of your book, right? It's very relatable in that so many people, I'm sure, could read that and say, "Oh my gosh, I've been there," or "I'm there now," or "I understand it." It's not that it's something that others don't go through. That's when I call it the everyman story. I don't mean to say that it isn't a tremendous story, but I mean to say that I believe that so many people can say, "Oh my gosh, I see myself in that." And so, Tom, it took you until age 43, I believe, 2015, where you finally sort of crashed, or as you say, sort of fell off the edge, or finally came to that moment. So for you, that was the moment. Describe getting there and what happened to you and how it started to change.
Sure. So, I got remarried in 2012, moved to Bernards Township from Parsippany, and got back into politics because that was my comfort. So, I'm in a new town, kind of a stranger in a strange land. So I did what I would normally do. I volunteered. I was appointed to the library board. I was appointed to the zoning board. And the next thing I know, they're asking me to run for office. And I'm like, I
Here we
didn't
go.
do, yeah, here we go. But I didn't do those things to get to that point. Volunteered on a campaign or whatever. But it was like I was following the same script and didn't even realize it, because I was just doing what came naturally. And I'll never forget. I remember going to bed one night and I said to my wife, I said, I don't have the desire to run again. I said, I run a town right now in Newton, New Jersey, as an appointed official. I don't like politics. Like like it's fun, but it had its time and place.
Yeah.
I went to bed. I woke up the next day and I said, all right, I'm running. Let's do it. And I went into political Tom mode. And that
Oh,
is
boy.
a very successful yet destructive version of me, I'm sorry to say. And it worked, and I won. And it wasn't a heavy lift, because they have the line, and it was a screening, and then it was easy. In June and November, there was nothing, no campaigning. It was like it was handed to me.
Yeah.
And so most people would say, especially young people in politics, they'd be like, "Oh my God, like this is phenomenal, right? Like
Mhm.
you've been elected in two different towns, two very good towns, Parsippany." And most people don't know Bernards Township as much as they know Basking Ridge. So you
Right.
say that, and they're like, "Oh, Basking Ridge." They're like, all
Right.
right. And I was miserable. I was so miserable because I was living. And once it was another example of other people wanted me to do things. I wanted to be part of the clique, right? Because I wanted the acceptance. It was like high school. I'm telling you, it was high
Yeah.
school all over again.
Wow.
And I was living, I'm telling you, I went, and most people don't know this part of it. So I win the screening. It was on St. Patrick's Day. And I go to my office the next day and I cry my eyes out. I'm standing in my office in Newton and I'm saying, what a fraud. And
Wow.
it broke my heart. And then I'm saying, all right, but now I'm in it. So now I got to, I felt like I had to push through it. And I was miserable. And I just got to the point in September of 15 where I'm in that same office in Newton, beautiful, well-appointed office. And I am this is, like a year into it. So now I got the anxiety, I got the depression, and now I want to kill myself. Like, how did I went from, the young child in Lincoln Park that was always happy and had fun, to the fat kid getting bullied, to starving myself, to the success externally in politics, to now I'm 43 years old and I don't think my life is worth living. I mean, it's horrible. And I just got to the point where I'm in my office. It was like a Friday night or a Thursday night. It was dark. It was late. And I heard a voice, and the voice said, "Tom, it's time." And I'm saying, "All right, I don't know who's talking because I'm the only one here." So either I'm hearing things or God is speaking to me. And I got up off the floor and I said, "Okay, I don't want to die, but I don't want to live this life either. So something's got to give." But at that point, I didn't have a plan. Like, I had zero thought of, well, okay, what do I do? And that became the impetus of traditional therapy. It was Christian coaching.
Right.
It was a 5-day intensive of unpacking all my garbage, and what the purpose of the ministry that I went through was recovery and restoration, because most programs will focus on recovery, right? Like AA, Narcotics Anonymous, you have this issue, we're going to help you stop doing this, and then that's the recovery. But the program I went through was recovery, but then restoration, and because it's Christian, it was restoration through Christ, right? So it combined the traditional and the spiritual, and it was perfect for me because it was something, like we talked about before, I never really made faith or spirituality a priority. And so now I was being given that opportunity. The ministry is right in Basking Ridge, so it was like it was handed to me, because it was, here I am in the same town, I'm an elected official, and I'm getting Christian coaching because I'm miserable because I'm an elected official, and other things, of course. But it was transformational for me. It made me realize that I, along with God, could define who I was and what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. So I tell people, I blew up my world. I changed people, places, and things. I hit the reboot button on my life. But then I started to write the script of what my existence needed to look like. And instead of Tom being first, it was God first, then my wife, then my daughters, and everybody else.
Yeah.
And I used to tell people I would obsess over finances and weight and image and title and whatever, everything, like all the things we worry about in life, I would obsess over. And what I did was I flipped the entire thing and said, well, I'm going to focus on my relationship with God first, and then everything else fell into place. And it sounds so simple saying it now, but it was so foreign to me 6 years ago. It was like, well, if I knew it was that easy, I would have done it 30 years ago, but I didn't, because I had to put Tom first to fill that void.
Yeah.
And now that I have that relationship with God, that's the thing that fills the void. I don't need the title or the money or the Rolex or these other things. And it doesn't mean I don't have the title and the money and whatever. It's just those aren't the priority. And by having that relationship with God first, it changed. I went from standard definition TV, Liz, to high definition. I went from a very narrow view of what life should look like to a very wide angle, very, very forward thinking view of my career and my relationships, and everything changed for me because I hit rock bottom and I was able to pull myself out of it. But only because of God's grace was I able to do that. It certainly wasn't my own, my own work.
Is it ever too late for someone listening to this to do the same thing?
No, and that's the thing, because you would say, well, can people in their 40s and 50s and 60s make change? Is it too late? And I tell people, and I coach people, I work with people in organizations, and I tell them, you're never too old to make those changes. You have to put in the effort. And the mistake that some people of faith make is, well, if I just pray, that's enough. And it's like, no, like, luck is when opportunity meets preparation, right? But God wants you to be happy and successful, definitely. And God wants to have a relationship with you, but you need to do the work too. So whether it's counseling or therapy, or whether it's changing bad habits, or whether it's other things, like you need to meet God halfway. Like, don't expect God to do all the work, or I'm going to sit here and pray I'm going to win the lottery. I want the right relationship. I want the career change. Yeah, that's great. But you want the career change, but are you networking? Do you have a LinkedIn profile? Did you update your resume? Like, those are the little things you do that, if you're in alignment and that's part of God's plan for you, things will work out. Just like, me writing the book or me doing the teaching. So you're never too old. It's just, you want to catch this as early on as you can, so that you can live a very fulfilling and rewarding life, because there's no guarantees. Like we live every day as if we're all going to be 80 and 90 and 100 years old. And some of us are not that fortunate. Or, that's when the health issue comes, or that's when the financial challenges come. So you want to figure this out as early on as you can, whether it's me and my book, whether it's working with me as a coach, or whether it's other people. There's some really great people out there doing awesome work that can, I think everybody needs a mentor. Everybody needs a coach. And I think it's very important. I think in this society, I think we've marginalized men and kind of made them irrelevant. And so I'm here to say men are not irrelevant, but men need coaching and guidance, because if they didn't have that from a parental figure or somebody in their community, men have a great tendency to be successful, but to kind of flounder around too, because they're not grounded in something bigger than themselves. And so that became the impetus for the book and my coaching, to say, hey, men, like, get your stuff together, but here's a plan, because men are usually good about following, directions, at least, not driving directions.
Not driving.
But like if you give them a plan, many of them will stick to it.
Yes.
So I had to create my own plan, but now I can share that plan with other people. So yeah, age is irrelevant. It really comes down to how committed are you to making changes in your life.
Right. And really for some people, how desperate are you to do it? Right. And you don't need to wait till you're desperate. And it's a great segue for us to talk about what you do for people, because I too believe so much in coaching and mentoring. So tell people how you can help them. What are the various ways you work with people to get them to that point that you got to?
Sure. So, and it's kind of multiple levels. So, the easiest and most basic, obviously, is the book itself, because the book, the first half of the book is my journey. The second half of the book is kind of lessons learned, and it gives you a very general overview of the things I did or the things I learned, so that people could get something out of it. But, it's kind of, not that it doesn't go into detail, but obviously it's a book. So there's some level that it's surface, right? But then I coach people one-on-one, and what I'll do with them one-on-one is I'll do a SWOT analysis, which I normally do for organizations, but I brought it down to the personal level to say, okay, Liz, what are your strengths? Like, nobody else in the room, but be honest. What are you great at? What do you enjoy? What are you passionate about? Make the list. Okay, same question, but on the other side. If you don't want to call them weaknesses, it's fine, but everybody's got challenges or weaknesses they have to push through. Be honest. Do you have addictions? And, I'm be blunt here. Some men are addicted to porn, gambling, financial issues. Some people are having affairs in their marriage. Okay, well, those are weaknesses. Those are obstacles. Those are things preventing you from getting from point A to point B. But what are the opportunities? And then what are the threats to those opportunities? And most people never think to do that type of analysis of themselves, but yet they'll do it in an organization or a department and not think twice about it. So I brought it down from, and this goes back to my time in graduate school when I did my thesis. So I've done this for 30 years now. It's like, take that, pull it to a personal level, and then work with them. And then through my new coaching program that I'm launching in September, I realized that there tended to be the same issues and categories, right? It's the professional, it's the relational, it's the health, it's financial. Like, everybody was going through the same thing. So then what I do now is I make them score themselves on a scale. It's, I tried to make it very simple. Like, okay, 0 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 10. Like, where are you at? Like, we have to benchmark where you're at today. And then we got to figure out what the thing is that you want to work on, because, you can't fight all these battles at the same. Like, you can't change your career, improve your marriage, relationship with your kids, lose the 30 pounds, do the stock market, buy the real estate. Like that level of multitasking doesn't happen. So sometimes you got to say, you know what, my priority right now is my career. Great. Okay, so how can I help you with your career? And then I go into very specific programs about that. Or if it's relational, we work on that. And I find that when you walk with people in that fashion and you're their accountability partner, then there's the success. Because there's I've read Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle, Shefali Sabari. I mean, there's a lot of people I've read over the years, but until I had, and for me, it was men, until I had men that could mentor me, and then I could confide in and say, this is my challenge, or this is my issue, or this is my temptation. How do I work through it? I struggled. And then when I found those mentors, and a lot of them I found through my new church and through my connections through the ministry, that changed everything for me, because then I had somebody, not only was I accountable to God and myself, but then I felt like I had somebody else that was it was like a cheerleader. They wanted me to
Yeah,
succeed.
right.
So I provide that cheerleading and mentoring for people now. I do individual, I do small group, and then I still do the organizational. But when people read the book or they go through the program and I hear the changes that they make, it's very rewarding.
It's great.
I'm not. Sometimes, you say, was it worth it? Going through all that pain and then writing about it. And sometimes it's hard because, I exposed myself writing a book about my life. But then when I hear the stories, I say to myself, it was worth it because I'm helping to change marriages and relationships and people's trajectory. And I always tell them, sometimes I do it. I volunteer. I help people. Obviously, I have paid, clients as well. I always tell them, pay it forward.
Yeah.
There's going to be somebody you're going to encounter that's going to have an issue, that's going to have a challenge. And I'm imploring you, whether you're paying me, not paying me, whatever our relationship is, you got to promise me to pay it forward. And they always do because they get it. Once they get into this program, into the things that I offer them, they understand that we're all connected. And if we all just do a little bit extra to help each other, then it's worth it.
That's what makes life rich. And what you said before, no man is an island, and nor is any woman. But as that saying goes, no man is an island. You really need people around you, wisdom and coaches and mentors and people that have been there before you. Because I know I don't want to talk to somebody who needs to help me, who hasn't gone through what I've gone through. And so what you've been through is valuable and relatable, and that's why it matters. And so you helping someone else, and then there's that chain effect. And so we know they can get the book. And again, for everyone listening, there are no politics in heaven. I know that's probably backwards on the screen, but there it is. That's what it looks like. It's a great cover. This is on Amazon. And then give everybody else the best way, information to reach out to if they'd like to talk to you about coaching, any kind of mentoring. How do they reach you?
Sure. So the book is on Amazon, the website, nopoliticsinheaven.com. They can sign up to learn about my new coaching endeavors at thomasrussojr.com. And then, I'm on LinkedIn, which is my strongest social media platform. I have about 26,000 connections, Facebook and Twitter. Drop me a line, pick up the book or whatever, or you just want to have a conversation. I've worked with people all around the world. I do podcast interviews. It almost seems nightly now, and it's fun. I love it. It's great because obviously I'm still running the town in Newton and enjoying my full-time endeavors, teaching at the 3 colleges. But when I think people can tell when I talk about my story and I talk about my faith, that's when I'm really my happiest.
Yeah.
And if people want to connect, if I can't help them, I will be a resource for them. I've always been a great conduit to other things. That's the blessing of politics as a kid, that I knew the value of networking and meeting people. So if I can't help you, I'm sure I can find somebody, but I implore people to have that relationship with a coach or a mentor. They won't hesitate about spending money on Starbucks and all these other things. We all do it. But coaching or a book like this is investing in yourself. And at some point, especially now coming out of a pandemic and a lot of people suffering financially and with mental health issues.
So true.
There's a lot of people hurting right now, and they need some positivity and they need some love and care. And my book, I hope I offer that to them.
You definitely do. And I'm going to end with a great quote from your book near the end, when you said you made a vision board and it said, "Happiness is my default position." I love that. Happiness is my default position. And, Tom, you bring a lot to the world. And I just admire you for putting it out there, for being transparent, for writing the book, for hoping that you help other people, and you already have. And, that's what life is all about, if we can make it easier for somebody else. So everybody, you heard all the ways to get in touch with him. Do that, reach out, and you'll definitely be a better person for it. Tom, thank you so much for the interview. Thank you so much for your transparency and your heart. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Liz.